Okay, in this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to go about uh, setting up the what we call the data flow in the organizations. So this is what we call a swim lane flow chart. So in a swim lane flow chart, you will have something like that. Over here, we will be able to see the section what we call the row. Okay, the row is where the respective departments will be located. I've used text box like this that you can use to type in the departments and then just move it into this lane. Okay, so you can actually copy Control C and then Control P, Control V to paste. And let's say your organization has what we call the HR. We just have to type HR. Okay, it's quite simple. And then in the data flow diagram, you will have these basic things of how the data enters into the organizations, gets stored, used, or disclosed, and transfer. Okay, so what do all these things means? Okay, basically collection means how the data comes into the organization. It can be through physical forms that people fill up, a customer fill up, or it can be through online forms that people sign up for a certain program or register for membership or a course or whatever. After this information, they will be stored. These days, most of the information is stored into the cloud. So, for example, if your organization is using Google Drive or Google Workplace, you will have a symbol, something like a container, showing that the information is stored there. And most organizations also actually have a physical storage. Okay, for example, a backup hard disk where they store the data inside. So this will be put as local. Okay, next we'll be talking about how the data is used. So the data, for example, let's say you collected from the sales and marketing, get stored up. It will be used in future for email marketing, where you email the information, or even you can do telemarketing. But these days, telemarketing don't seems to work. So I just stick on with email marketing. As for disclosure, you can either, let's say, you have to disclose the data to other departments or outside organizations. You can put it there. For my side, I prefer to just put under use for internal, and anything that go out of the company, I'll just put over here as a disclosure. So for example, I send out the products, okay, delivery products to a courier service, and I have to release them the personal data. So the courier service will be over disclosure. So for example, I click on this one, and then I put the delivery. So this will be what we call a disclosure, because you disclose it to a party that is outside the organizations. So for me, I would like to normally change the color so that it becomes very clear in that sense that you can straight away see that this color belongs to entity that is outside organizations. So for example, okay, now I'll be going through some of the shapes, the common shapes that you'll be looking at. Shapes that say rectangle shapes are what we call processes. Okay, delivery is a process. Email marketing is a process. Collection of forms and all these things is a process. Storage, this is a symbol of storage. Okay, like a container. And then this is what you call a decisions symbol. Okay, decision symbol is used when you need to get the, let's say, the leadership to make certain decision. For example, the departmental manager to make decision before the information can be used by the staff. So you will need this thing if your process has this part called decision making. Okay. Okay. So once you kind of think through how the organization data comes in, gets where they are stored and how they are used and how they are disclosed, you can actually put up something like that, a diagram like that. Okay. So what is actually transfer? Transfer is mainly for organization where the data actually goes out of Singapore. So for example, very common among the tour agencies, the personal data actually has to go overseas because they have to arrange with the overseas tour agency. They have to arrange with the hotels and so forth. So often they will actually send this information out to all this entity that is not located in Singapore. So for such a case, we will put them under transfer. So if your organization does not send out information out of Singapore, this portion actually you can even omit. Okay, I've left it here so that you can get an overview because one of my clients he has data going overseas. Okay, so the next thing will be what we call arrows. Arrows, okay, vertical arrows, horizontal arrows connecting this thing. So the arrow shows that the forms is collected and stored in Google Drive because I'm using Google Form. Okay, so it all depends on how your data comes in. So let's say if you have a physical forms, then you can come out another box and then just put the forms. So this one can be a interview forms, can be a registration form, but this will be a physical form. Okay, so either you want to put physical form or you just put form will do. It up to how you actually uh, want to describe this thing. Okay, for physical form, how are you going to store? Okay, so maybe you store it up in a cabinet. So let's say it is a cabinet. Okay, because they contain personal data, you need to ensure it's safe. The cabinets has to be locked, so you can just put over here as a cabinet. Okay, can you see this? Yeah. Okay, so to make it easy, you just ensure that they are in line, and then you just have to copy and then paste the arrows, and then what you do is that you connect them this way. So the data flows and then gets stored in the cabinets. Let's say if you actually scan the physical forms and store it in your hard disk, so what you can do is that you guys go to arrow and draw a line from the arrow from this cabinet to the way to the local hard disk. Okay, so the data actually flows from the cabinet to the local hard disk. And let's say if you actually go directly to the Google Workspace as your centralized uh, storage, you can then actually link it up directly to the Google Drive. Okay, and then let's say from the Google Drive you are doing the backup with the local drive as a backup system. So what you can do is that you just have to move the arrow the way that the shows that the data actually flows from the cloud down to the physical hard disk. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Wait. I show you this way. Okay. So I just have to move it a bit, make it looks nicer. So what happened here? You can see that the data collected in physical forms goes to the cabinet. It can be scanned. I didn't actually label it because I think it's common sense that you have to scan to send up your files into the Google Drive. Okay, so I just leave it, and then after that, the Google Drive you will actually do downloading, to your physical hard disk. Okay, and the organization will be actually using it from the Google Drive to do their email marketing. Okay, so can you see how a data flow can be easily drawn? So this data flow diagram is so important because it helps you to have a overview of how the data flows into the organization, stored, used, disclosed, or transfer, so that when you are doing the next phase or you want to streamline your organization or to ensure that your personal data is protected, you can easily get a very clear overview of what is going on. Okay. Uh, of course, the aspect of email is a issue that I'll be covering in the next training. Because email technically is just like a postcard. When you send information through email, and if your files, okay, are not encrypted, it means that the files that is encrypted will be stored in the email server, and this once this is hacked by anyone, by hacker, all this personal data will be breached, will be leaked out to all these hackers. So it is very important that you do not send files, unencrypted files, in the email system. Okay, so this is one of the aspects that I'll be covering later in the training program. Okay, so I hope you understand about the data flow diagram, how to draw it up. As you can see that normally the departments that collect data and use data will have bigger space. Okay, will have bigger space. So for example, HR and operations might be using lots of data. So for example, let's say it's a tuition company, a tour company, and so forth. Then the data will be used a lot in their operations. But let's say the company is handling a lot of stuff. So the HR will be using much of the data. So it all depends. I'll be covering how the data will be actually kind of managed. I do not recommend all those data to be stored as a centralized one file approach. I would prefer each department taking charge of their own data that they have collected or that they disclose, and take responsibility of it in the departmental level. So in that sense, is that if any files, personal data files, was breached or got lost or whatever, it only contained that specific departments, okay, and it will not involve the whole organizations. And I will be also sharing about how to label the files, so that and how to encrypt the files in a future training. This is to ensure that the whole transfer of files containing personal data through the email system will not leak out or send wrongly to the, even when you send wrongly to the wrong person, this they will not be able to open up the files because of the encryption. I'll be also sharing how you can the encryption program that I propose and how to use them. Okay, so basically that's about all for this training. I would recommend that you use the Google Slides for your collaboration, because Google Slides can be used by people from various departments. Uh, I normally like to just put it in Google Slides in this format, so that every department who are handling their personal data, they will be responsible for coming out this data flow for their department. And then after all the departments has filled up, then the DPO, who will be kind of an expert in processes, will actually go through and will be asking certain questions and see whether how the various department link up in the use of the personal data. If they need to use across departments, okay, for example, HR, he need to release the personal data to of the staff to the finance, correct? Because they need to settle the payroll and so forth. Okay, so over here, maybe I will have a row of finance. Okay, finance. Okay. So basically, let's say the finance will be using for what? For payroll. So you can see that this part can be settled by the HR. So this lane will be settled by the finance, this lane will be settled by the HR, this lane will be settled by the operations, and so forth. So using Google Slides helps in this collaboration, so everybody can actually have an overview. And it's so important that you have a deadline set for your staff so that you can get things done. If you just leave it there, I tell you that the staff normally will not even bother. So basically, I would like to give about a week, yeah, a week for them to complete. Then you can check it on a daily basis and remind them. So in that sense, that the data flow diagram will be completed. Okay, that's about all. So this is what we call the data flow diagram of the organization, of how the personal data enters into the organization, stored in the organization, used in an organization, or get transferred out of Singapore. Okay, thank you very much for these sessions, and then I will share more in the next training sessions.